Hello, and welcome to A Critical Dragon, where I talk about narrative in film, television, and in books. And today, it's going to be kind of like a prologue analysis. I want to have a look at Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, not only because when it was written, it was a warning about the future being set in 2024, but now we see it's just prescient about the future as we are living in 2024. Thankfully, it's not quite as bad as Butler portrayed, but it's one of the things I love about near future science fiction. Um, we quite often catch up to when it is set, and you go, and it provides an interesting perspective on what the author was warning us about, or predicting, or developing, and what they could see were potential avenues that we would go down, and what has actually come to pass. So, if you haven't read Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sword, this is a great year to do it because that's the year it starts, and the whole Earthseed story is predicated on starting in 2024. But the other thing I wanted to tie this into was a comment I'd received on a video, and also a recent comment that my nemesis, Dr. Philip Chase, had made in a video when he was talking about reviewing and how Goodreads is not necessarily indicative of a great attitude toward reviewing. Because there's a whole load here about personal preferences and the criteria we use to judge texts. Now, obviously, given my lit background, I was taught a whole load of things about how to approach and understand literature. That is a whole host of preconceptions and notions that I have that were established in the analysis of the Western canon. Are they the be-all and end-all of everything? No, of course not, because the vast majority of people read texts for enjoyment. So enjoyment is a key aspect of whether or not they like a book. But there are two phrases there, or two words there. It is a key aspect, one of the aspects, and the other is it's about whether they liked it, not whether or not the book was good. And when we conflate good and like, or like and good, and dislike and bad, we are doing a disservice not only to ourselves, to anyone who reads our reviews, but also to the book itself. And I think Philip got a little bit of flack for expressing this. And the thing is, like, it makes perfect sense. You go on a site like Goodreads, where some people give very detailed reviews, but it is distilled down into an aggregate of stars. And if everyone used exactly the same criteria, if we all had the same criteria that Goodreads asked us in terms of characterization, how would we rate this? In terms of action, how would we rate this? In terms of setting, how would we rate this? And there was a little rubric under each one telling us how to rate for that. If we all did that, and then that gave the total score, and everyone on Goodreads did that, then that would actually be very, very different to what we currently have, which is when someone reads a book and go, I really enjoyed that. That's 5 stars. It was a 5-star read. There is a difference between a 5-star read, something we really enjoy, and a 5-star book, something that is really good. Because if I go to a restaurant, someone orders for me and they order me salmon, I really don't like salmon. And it's beautifully prepared, beautifully presented. It is cooked perfectly. The flavors are all balanced. But I didn't like salmon. I didn't want salmon. And so I give the restaurant a 1-star review. I didn't like the food. But liking the food is not an adequate way to evaluate the restaurant, because there's a whole load of things. Was the food well prepared? Were the ingredients fresh? Was the service good? How was the decor? How was the ambiance? Like, we can come up with a whole host of criteria. And if we all agreed on those criteria, and we had a measurement for where something fell on it, then what someone might find is in my review, then I'd have ticked all of the different boxes all the way down. Say, oh, well, the ingredients they used were really fresh and great ingredients. It was beautifully presented. The service was friendly. Like I could go down through this whole list, and then there would be one saying, like, did you enjoy the food? And it's like, no, I didn't. And my enjoyment would be taken into consideration, but it would be weighed against all of the other criteria. And that's a lot of what Philip and myself generally talk about when we talk about these things. The enjoyment of a book might be of the greatest importance to us when we are reading in our leisure time, because that is why we are reading. And we want to tell people about our experience. But our reading experience, how we felt when we read it, that is one aspect of a review. And ignoring all of the other things and saying, well, the one thing I know about is this, and that's the one thing I'm going to talk about, and I'm just going to call it a book, is a bit like, oh, a marathon is 26 miles long. I don't want to run that far. I'm just going to run 100 meters and call it a marathon. And if people do that, and some people are running 100 meters, some people are running 500 meters, some people are running 5 miles, some people are running 17 miles, and some people are running 26 miles. And their evaluations are all based on radically different experiences, then that doesn't give you a true measure of what a marathon is like. And it's the same with book reviewing. When we review books, we're meant to be talking about the book, not how we felt. How we felt can be a signal about various aspects. It can help us locate aspects to talk about. But there's a whole vocabulary and a whole set of concepts. And in this day and age, with YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and free online courses, that education is now more accessible to anyone who is interested than at any other point in human history. Books are now more accessible than at any other point in human history. And if we say, well, I just don't want to do that, no one is saying that you have to. But if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to learn about these things, then be honest about that and admit then that this isn't a book review. This is a reader report or a reading experience. And calling it that, it doesn't lessen it. It just means that we're not confusing a review of the book and how we felt about the book. That's all it is. It's not that how we feel about a book is unimportant, but when it comes to reviews of a text, the review is meant to focus on what the text is doing, because we are not representative of every reader. Our backgrounds are individual, and therefore our preferences and our enjoyments are individual. And if this is being distilled down into some mathematical equation, we have to have the same variables. If we don't have the same variables, it means that that number is meaningless, absolutely meaningless. And in fact, what that number ends up doing, particularly on sites like Goodreads, is it can significantly damage an author's reputation and livelihood, or it can overinflate an author's reputation and livelihood. Because if we're not comparing apples to apples, oranges to oranges, what we're doing is someone's talking about, oh, this was an excellent car. I love this banana. Those things do not give you insight into a text unless you are intimately familiar with the person giving the review. Because if you understand someone's preferences and their biases, then sure. But the issue is when you look at a number, that number does not reflect that nuance. You'd have to look at their written review or their video review. And if you're going to look at their video review or their written review, then the number is irrelevant because you're actually interested in their thoughts on it. But if their thoughts are I like and I don't like, and you have to go through, well, I've read X number of books that they have read, and our things align, our preferences align on a certain number of things. Okay, that's a guide. But that actually takes more effort for us individually than it would for us to spend 5 minutes going, here are the standard criteria that people use to review books. Why don't I do that? Because if everyone did that, then it wouldn't matter whose review you went to. You would actually be able to get a lot more out of it. But for some reason, we don't do that. And we don't like it when people point this out, that we are doing things incorrectly. And I'm not immune from this. Like, one of the reasons I don't review anymore, I don't enjoy it, but I'm just as guilty of this as other people. I was just going, wow, I really enjoyed that. Was fantastic. I loved this and I loved how this was done. Instead of actually thinking about the text, instead of actually thinking about how the author achieved these things, what they were doing, and then thinking about it from that less objective standpoint or less subjective standpoint, trying to get a better sense so that someone who didn't have my background and interests or hadn't my reading history, that they would be able to get something from my review rather than asking people to do an in-depth analysis of who I was and other things that I had reviewed in order to work out whether or not they were going to agree or disagree. And so if we're going to treat reviews as useful for whether or not we want to purchase a book, then having a standard set of criteria that actually analyze what a book is doing rather than how we feel about it is the first step. Because face it, there are books that we read when we were younger that we loved. Oh, it's a 5-star book. I love this book. It was so awesome. We read them now. We go, this is terrible. But the book hasn't changed. If our review was accurate when we were younger, it would be the same then as it is now because the book hasn't changed. But if our review changes radically, then we weren't analyzing the book. We were analyzing how we felt. And it's as simple as that. And the reason this popped into my head was, someone had commented saying that they'd read Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower and thought her writing was terrible, that it was bad, that she couldn't write. And I was taken aback because Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower is a great book. Like it's really good. And it's good on the criteria of the writing is good. The story is good. The characters are good. The word good is useless in all of these senses because it's not giving you an idea of what the book is about, how things are done. But there isn't a problem with her writing. The writing on the page is really perfect for what she was trying to achieve. And I don't want you to take my word on this. I'm going to do what I usually do, and I'm going to put an example up on the screen. I had my recurring dream last night. I guess I should have expected it. It comes to me when I struggle, when I twist on my own personal hook and try to pretend that nothing unusual has happened. It comes to me when I try to be my father's daughter. Today is our birthday, my 15th and my father's 55th. Tomorrow, I'll try to please him and the community and God. So last night, I dreamed a reminder that it's all a lie. I think I need to write about the dream because this particular lie bothers me so much. I'm learning to fly, to levitate myself. No one is teaching me. I'm just learning on my own, little by little, dream lesson by dream lesson. Not a very subtle image, but a persistent one. I've had many lessons, and I'm better at flying than I used to be. I trust my ability more now, but I'm still afraid. I can't quite control my directions yet. So I'm just going to stop there. Like, that is literally the first 2 paragraphs of Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. So let's talk about what it is and isn't doing. So obviously the first thing, first person narration. And it's from the position of a 15-year-old girl. How do we know this? I had my recurring dream. So the narrator is I, first person. It comes to me when I try to be my father's daughter. So, female narrator. Today is our birthday, my 15th. She's 15. Okay. So, in that, we are given definitely like an idea of who this character is, who our narrator is. The other thing is, she also mentions, I think I need to write about the dream because this particular lie bothers me so much. What I find interesting about this, because we're going to talk now about the style of writing that Butler is using. This is not fully informal, colloquial, and sort of in the vernacular. It's not full on low diction, but neither is it formal writing, like an essay or something like that. It's semi-formal writing, and it's consistently semi-formal. So what do I mean by this? If you were explaining, if you were telling someone what happened, we use a lot of sentence fragments, we use a lot of contractions, we tail off on things, we don't complete full thoughts, we say things incorrectly, we don't use proper grammar. If we are writing very formally, it is much more stiff, much more formal. There's a stronger emphasis on structure and grammar. And what we have here is a blend of the two. Because when we write something down, even if we are journaling, and I suppose some people journal stream of consciousness style, which is one way to do it. But quite often when we journal, when we go to write something down, we move up at least a half step in our level of formality. Because as we are trying to write, we tend to formalize slightly our writing. Now, these two paragraphs, we still have plenty of contractions. We still have little short sentences, little sentence fragments, and run-on sentences. We still have all of those things that we would expect from a very informal style. But at the same time, we have that slight level of formality. My father. When I try to be my father's daughter, okay, so that's actually like a common phrase. When I am my father's son. We don't say I'm my dad's son. But she even refers to it. It's my 15th and my father's 55th. So use of the term father is slightly more formal than dad or dad, pops, or whatever other informal term. We also I had my recurring dream last night. Okay, we talk about recurring dreams. Again, that might just be a term that we use. I guess I should have expected it. It comes to me when I struggle. My personal hook. All of these are semi-formal words. This is not the diction of 15-year-old slang. This is not colloquial speech, but neither is it fully formal. If you look at when I twist on my own personal hook, that it comes to me when I struggle, then there's the M dash and this explanation of what that means. And then the repetition, it comes to me when I try to be. Today is our birthday. The jumping around a bit is closer in style to stream of consciousness, but it is being represented in this semi-formal style, which matches with the conceit that this is a 15-year-old girl writing down her thoughts and trying to organize them and trying to be consistent. And it's straddling that line between formal and informal really, really well. And then we think about the amount of detail that is actually embedded into this. So in that first paragraph, which is ostensibly about, I had a dream last night. Given that this is called the parable of the sower, so we're already thinking in terms of religious allegory, and then I had my recurring dream, certain evocations of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we're already in that mindset. That's already being suggested. So opening with this dream is actually really, really interesting. And the dream is of flying, is of freedom, and is of freedom that she is struggling to attain, but bit by bit, she is fighting for this freedom. And she can't quite control her directions yet. There is so much embedded in that that is foreshadowing for the direction of this story. And then we have We know she struggles when she tries to be her father's daughter. Therefore, being her father's daughter, being the daughter that her father expects her to be and to live up to his image of her and what people think of him, is not natural to her. That's communicated. We know that they share the same birthday, which is interesting because she is clearly very different to her father. We also know that he he became her father quite late in his life. She's 15 and he's going to be 55. So he was 40 when she was born. And then tomorrow I'll try to please him. So she doesn't normally please him, but she's going to make an effort to do that. And when she says, I'll try to please him and the community and God. So we get religion and community brought into. So again, in these opening paragraphs, we have so much about what this book is going to be about, embedded in something in such a way that we don't realize how much we're actually picking up on. This is very clever writing. This is very good writing. It is very believable writing. It is very authentic writing. And for all of those reasons, we can say this is good. None of those reasons say, I must enjoy this writing. Because we might not enjoy this style. We might not enjoy this register. We might not even enjoy this type of story. But the writing on the page is good. It is matching with the point of view. It is supporting the narrative decision to tell us in first person and as kind of a form of journal of this person's thoughts. And it's not doing it as stream of consciousness, which would be more revelatory about their thought process. The conceit would be inside their head. But this is more that they have thought about it and they are writing it down. That's the conceit. And this style does that. It supports that. It promotes that. And so the style matches the narrative. The details in it are giving us a lot of information, but disguising the fact that they are giving us a lot of information. Like, that is good writing. It's engrossing writing. It may not be the writing we want. It may not be the writing we like. But just because we don't want this or we don't like this doesn't make it bad writing. And that's why when we talk about reviewing and when we talk about these, oh, this was a slog. Slog, obviously, a pejorative. It is a negative way to describe the slow progress of quite often plot functions, narrative events. Or it describes the fact that we were bored and we were disinterested or uninterested. Like those are encapsulated by the term slog. If we say this is a slow burn, well, that is far more neutral in that, yeah, it's describing that there's a slower pace set to the action, in at least initially. So why use slog when we could use slow burn, which is not making that judgment? Why I wanted to talk about this, not only to show off Octavia Butler's writing and to tell people to go and read the book, but when someone says that reviewing is about the book, not how we felt, that is not to say that how you feel about the book is unimportant. All that is saying is that there are other criteria that we use to evaluate texts. How much we like it is a very important consideration among many other considerations. It's not discount how you feel entirely. What you feel is unimportant. And even if, for you personally, enjoyment is the absolute most important thing, it's not for every reader. Not every reader values enjoyment the same way that you do, privileges that the same way that you do, and is also going to experience enjoyment for that text the same way that you do. So who are you writing the review for? Are you writing the review to post online, in which case you're writing for an audience and that audience is different to you? So if you're writing for other people and the only way that they can truly understand your perspective of the book is to know you personally, is that an effective review? I would argue that it isn't. That's not an effective. Oh, but a whole load of people didn't like this book. Great. There's a whole load of people don't like certain sports teams. It doesn't necessarily mean that that sports team isn't good. There are a whole host of reasons why we like and dislike things. But when it comes to evaluating a text, there are a whole load of aspects. There are so many aspects within narrative that we can actually discuss. And we can discuss in a way that gets across not only how we feel about it, but gets it across in a way that other people who don't know us can understand the text, and then they can look at our review and decide whether or not it is worth picking up. And none of that invalidates how we feel about the text. And I don't know why people take it as an attack on their personal freedom. It's not. But if you haven't read Parable of the Sower, I'd strongly recommend you read Parable of the Sower. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your continued support, and I will see you in the next one.